Welcome to JHart Modelworks. It's time to get started on the Revell 69 Chevy Nova, and we're going to start with modifying the body to take the C1 body kit and preparing the body for paint. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is take a Sharpie marker and mark all of our mold seams. This will make them easier to see, and in theory, when you go to sand them, once you've sanded away all the Sharpie, your mold seam should also be completely gone as well. I really need a new Sharpie. This one is done for. Once all the seams are marked off, we'll start with our 400 grit UMP thinny stick sander and work at removing the mold seams. We want to be careful to just remove the sharp edges of the mold seam without changing the shape of the body panels themselves, especially on these top edges. Test with your finger every so often. You should be able to feel when the sharp edge of the mold line is gone, and then we'll switch to a UMP sponge sander to finish it off. The sponge sander will follow the contours of the body, smoothing the edges out without cutting them down and damaging the shape. Again, check with your fingers periodically. You can tell by feel when that edge is gone. There are a couple of sprue nubs on the inside of the engine bay, and these need to come off. One of mine broke off in the box, leaving a nasty edge. We're just going to use our display nippers to cut them off, and then we'll clean the sides up very carefully with a hobby knife and our sanding sticks. Don't pull hard. You don't want to accidentally cut yourself. Just gentle pressure, scrape off the excess plastic, and then sand it clean. Next, we're going to take our Tamiya engraving tool and re-scribe all the panel lines. Most of them are pretty good, but I want to be sure they won't fill up with paint in 2K clear. There's no need to go crazy. Pretty much just 4 or 5 passes will do it until the blade flows smooth and you know there's no junk in the panel lines. Now for areas like this with a lot of complex curves, I like to work in small sections, just kind of work back and forth, very gentle. You don't want to put a lot of pressure. You don't want to risk jumping out of the lines and scarring the body. When I'm done, I like to hit the lines with a wide bristle soft brush, just to get out any debris that may be left over from cutting. Another thing I like to do is hit the lines with some Tamiya panel line accent color. There's a couple of reasons. If it flows really well, I know the panel lines are clean of debris, but also if I've accidentally jumped out of the lines and scratched the body real bad, the panel liner will quickly flow in there and show me where I need to fill and repair the scratches. Now we're going to repeat the process, going through all the door panels, the trunk lids, things like that, and hitting all of the window trim lines. Normally I use bare metal foil on the window trim after I paint and before I 2K, and I like to make sure I have good clean lines around the trim to help cut the foil, so it's good to re-scribe around all the trim. This time, however, I plan on spraying Alclad for the window trim after I 2K. So it is even more important that we have nice deep trim lines to mask off after the 2K is cured. The kit has some Nova badging on the sides and on the trunk. I don't really like raised badging like this. You can't really airbrush it well, and painting it with a brush can get really messy. So I place some Tamiya tape over the side fins to protect that detail, and I'm going to use a hobby knife with a flat chisel blade to gently remove the badging. Once most of the badging is gone, we'll finish it off with a sanding stick to get the surface completely flush. We don't want ghosting of the badging showing up through our paint job. The kit has some decals I could use, but they aren't very realistic. Another option is Model Car Garage's photo etch set, but I'm not sure I want to pay $22 for a photo etch set when I likely won't use more than 4 or 5 pieces of it anyhow. I may end up just going badgeless on this build. The body has some indents on the doors and the trunk for locks, and you're supposed to cover them with some pretty unrealistic decals. Instead, like you've seen me do on most of my recent builds, I'm going to go ahead and drill a 0.6mm hole right in the center of them, and during final assembly I'll install some 1.2mm top studio rivets for more realism. To drill these, I start by using my dead center tool from Scale Pro Shop to form a pilot hole as close to the center as possible. Then I can just drill the hole with my pin vise without the bit wobbling on me. I find the dead center tool to be a really useful tool and a must-have for anybody who does a lot of drilling with small bits. Now we're getting into the exciting part, the C1 body kit. Now I need to remove the indented section on the rear end of the body. This is indented where the kit bumper would wrap around the body. The C1 kit bumper lines up more flush with the body panels instead. We're going to start with the rear bumper, and I'm going to mark my horizontal cut line and use my razor saw to cut across it. I'm then going to cut up from the body, trying to be very careful and making sure I don't accidentally get into any of the good part of the body I want to keep. I'm pretty sure I'll have to remove the entire indented section, but I'm going to start out just cutting off about half. It's a lot easier to take some more off than it is to put some back on. Yep, offering it up to the body for test fit shows I need to remove the rest of this. So again, just going to cut with the razor saw, and I'm going to be very careful to make sure I don't cut into the good part of the body. We'll of course use our sanding sticks to clean up all the edges. That looks perfect. Now we're just going to repeat this whole process on the other side for a final fit of the bumper. With both sides finished up, we'll do another test fit, and it's looking really good. This was a lot less intimidating than I thought it was going to be. Moving on to the front bumper, and I've ditched the razor saw in favor of the display nippers. They're going to make quick work of this front section. A little cleanup with a sander and a test fit, and it's clear we need to trim just a little bit off this lower indented section. A bit of cleanup with a hobby knife and sander, and a couple of test fits later, and the front is sitting perfect as well. Once again, a lot less work than I was anticipating. Onto the fender portion of the kit. The fenders come on these runners, kind of like sprues. But we don't want to try and pull or pry these loose. I'm even leery of using the nippers here. Resin can be very brittle and easy to break, so I'm carefully cutting these free with a hobby knife and a saw blade, and then cleaning these up with a sander. Once we have them cleaned up, we'll offer them up for a test fit, and the fit is absolutely perfect. Even the sections where the original fender flares out into the trim has been sculpted into the back of the fenders. We're going to take a fine tip permanent marker and we're going to mark off the under edge of the new fenders so we know where we need to cut on the body. Next, we're going to take the Dremel with a cutting bit and we're going to cut away the unwanted plastic until we get really close to the line we drew. You could do this with some nippers or with a hobby knife or with sanders. It's going to take a lot longer and will be a lot more work. And once we get really close to our line, we can clean the rest up with our hobby knife and some metal files to get right up to the top edge of the line we drew. And that fit is pretty much spot on. Once I do get them glued in place, I do go back and clean up the inside just a little bit with a grinding wheel on the Dremel. Unfortunately, I did not get that on camera. To glue these on, I'm using Bob Smith's IC2000 rubberized black CA glue. You can use any super glue, but I've wanted to try this stuff out for a bit now. The rubberized formula is slower to dry, but it's supposed to give a much stronger bond. I've also moved my Instaset from the original spray bottle to these little squeeze bottles with a syringe tip, and I find it gives me a massive improvement in control on how much Instaset I use and where it goes. Next, we're going to use some Tamiya polyester putty. You're supposed to press out a line of the putty from the white tube and an equal length line of hardener from this little orange tube. And then I'm going to use a Tamiya metal paint mixing stick to mix it all up and apply it. It should be properly mixed when the putty matches the color of the yellow cap. I like using the Tamiya paint stir stick because it's metal, which makes it easier to clean up when I'm done. I'm really liking the polyester putty a lot more than their original lacquer-based formula. The polyester putty doesn't seem to shrink back like the lacquer putty does. The lacquer putty can shrink back badly, especially if you're using lacquer-based paints, and then you end up with a sharp line that makes it clearly visible where the putty is under your paint. We want to apply this generously along the edge of the fender, and I tend to go back over it lightly with my finger just to smooth it out a little bit. We don't have to do this. If the bolted on or the attached look is what you're into, or if it's what you're going for, you could just stop right after you glue them on and it would be fine. But I want a seamless transition between the body and these fenders, like someone went in and really flared the heck out of them, or at least welded them on and cleaned them up really smooth. Once the whole edge is covered, I will do the rest of the fenders and leave it overnight to make sure the putty is fully cured before we start sanding. And now for the longest and most arduous part of this body kit, sanding away all this extra putty. I easily spent a couple of hours wet sanding with 400 grit micro mesh, using metal files, and even using Tamiya 400 grit sanding sponge to remove as much of the putty as I can. We're trying to remove all the excess putty off the fenders and from the body so that all that is left is a smooth, thin ribbon of putty that transitions evenly between the edge of the fender and the body panel. To really get into these corners, I'm going to wrap the sandpaper around my round metal file and use the file to give me some leverage on the sandpaper and really press it into this groove. We're also going to use the tip of the metal file itself to get in here and really clean up and redefine this lower body line. Yet more sanding with the 400 grit Tamiya sanding sponge. The way the sponge folds, it blends in with the contour of the surface and does a great job of getting in there and cleaning up along the curve. Once we are finally finished sanding, we're going to take the backside of the hobby blade and we're going to redefine the lower panel line that runs from the bottom of the door panel. We want to bring this line back right up to the edge of the new fender. And with the fenders fully installed, it looks something like this. While installing the front fenders, it became very clear the front turn signal markers were not going to survive the putty process. We ended up taking them off. So I'm going to go ahead and use my 400 grit thinny stick sander to remove the rear markers as well. I may look into 3D printing some new markers, or I may just go for a marker delete look. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, markers or no markers. With all the body modifications done, it's time to key the body. Normally I use 1000 or 3000 grit Tamiya sanding sponge, but this go around I opted to wet sand with 4000 grit micro mesh. I thought this might leave us with a smoother starting surface. We don't want to sand the crap out of the body or remove any details. We're just giving the body a gentle wet sand until the plastic is no longer shiny. This will give the surface a slightly rougher texture, but not any deep scratches, and will allow the primer to grip better to the body. Once the body is fully keyed, I wash my hands in Dawn dish liquid to remove any oils. I'm then going to use some UMP airbrush cleaner and a paper towel to wipe down the whole body. This will remove any grease from my hands from handling it, as well as any sanding material or debris and any contaminants like Instaset that might cause issues with our paint job. This will be the last time the body gets touched with my bare hands until after the 2K is dried. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up all the body kit work and all the prep work for getting this body ready for paint. From here we are going to go ahead and move into getting the body painted and cleared. Hopefully I can have that video up for you guys by next week. I'd like to thank all my subscribers as well as all of my viewers, anyone who watches my videos. Thank you very much for taking the time to hang out with me, and I'll catch you on the next one. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Also, feel free to leave comments, feedback, critique, or anything else in the comment section below. I enjoy interacting with all my viewers in the comment section and try to reply to all the comments I receive. If you want to catch future videos, please consider subscribing to my channel and make sure you click the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. As always, thank you for watching, keep modeling, and have a great day.